this particular workshop is about generative AI. Okay. But what it is important to know is the AI that is behind the scenes can also be used for analysis. You can use it for analysis. So what you can do is take a piece of text and say, give me question and answers from it. Right? So you can take a whole bunch of extraction. You can say, I've done this and may or may not show you today, but you take a piece of text and let's say you want to do a tweet, Emily. You take a piece of text that Justin gives you and you say, this is crap. You tell Justin, right? Because we are all geeks, we don't know how to write. Yeah. You can say rewrite it. Mm-hmm. You can make it say, write it in a form for 8-year-old. Yeah. And then you say, extract the entities from there and put hashtags.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, I actually wonder if Justin's watching, but I did use ChatGPT to help me write an applied AI post the other day. I edited it, but I put into ChatGPT. I said, just write me a snazzy post letting people know our speaker selection's done. Because I was curious. Yeah. I've been using ChatGPT to help with cover letters lately, which if anybody else is applying for jobs and needs help with cover letters, oh my God, ChatGPT writes amazing ones. But I wanted to see what it did with different subject matter, and it did give me the hashtags and everything. I didn't even have to ask.
Right, and so what I've noticed, so this is the last year, was it right, Val? We were all got together. We did our first generative AI workshop. Yeah. It's all about images, right? So there are a few images, sitting out there on the thing, but that was a big thing. So when DALL-E, OpenAI came up with some images, right, by using prompt, just a little bit of like English words, and we'll just come up with something, and we'll go through it today. Rima keeps telling me like, don't talk, just do, right? So I gotta, talk about this.
Is that for home or is it for work?
So, don't do a day job here. Okay. But it's very important to know that it is always synthesizing stuff. So synthesizing stuff means it will make mistakes. And what happens is that we are everything this is so good that we tend to believe that's a human cognition bias, right? It does with things with authority. And many times you test it, it's like, oh, 9 out of 10 is correct. In fact, many times it is so correct that you say the 10th time you don't question it, and that's where the problem lies, okay? And a lot has gone into this to make sure that it is among the guardrails, right? But still those guardrails are still being worked out. It's not perfect. And later we can go into like what people are doing for responsible AI, etc. But it's synthesizing. That's it. So when you talk about generative stuff, you always think it's synthesizing, right? So what I have seen is that, think about this as an onion, right? So it knows a lot of information, but you'll quickly know which of this AI is really good at what it is, to know like if it's the core, right? When it's in the core, it's like beautiful. You say, wow, this is better. And you go verify. And once you have that, you know that topic you can rely on. But then when it's on the edge, when you say, it says, hey, yeah, I know it. And you go look at it, it's like, damn, it's nothing. Everything was like false. Okay. I have generated YouTube URLs. So like, I say, give me this ChatGPT. I ask it to say, okay, great, give me sources. It will say, yeah, source. And you look like it's generated the website URL. You got YouTube URLs. And I go, this is great. I go there and I paste it in my research group and say, Arun, nothing works. It's perfect YouTube URLs, right? It's not nothing works. Probably it's 1 or 2 works, right? It's there. But even Generate's website, given the context, that's called hallucination. They're trying to remove the hallucination, right? And the other word that people use it is called bullshit generator. In fact, it's part of the vocabulary now. Okay, so bullshit is a pretty now in technical vocabulary. So welcome to that. Right?
I've been really adapted.
Yeah. And I'm like, should we use this? Like, and then I realized everybody's using it because that's the only way to kind of do this, to see, right? So the first thing we can do this is text, okay, then images, and then a little bit of code. We can get there, and then I'll be hanging out here for people, to kind of discuss. And I'm pretty sure we'll be discussing a lot, right? But let me give you a little bit of run through about what I had in mind, right? So I'll send you the link to this Google Doc, and you'll be able to see it. But we'll go through generative with what is AI, using generative AI. This is another company called u.com. I want to go through it, right? So this is, again, another tool. And then what is generative AI? All these, you can see screenshots from the tool itself. So this is what I was trying to Troy, is that almost like you want to go to a term called tabula rasa, right? So what I do is like, whatever the assumptions I have, I throw it away and say, what does it know? Then I can start from there, because then you can do with a beginner's mind. Then there's another thing called, again, UChat, and then prompts. So there's a lot you learn, but there's entire repositories that people have put these prompts together, right? So you can just go use that, like, what do I do? And then you learn a lot. That is, the language of AI is non-deterministic, meaning it's not like any other programming language or any other known language. It's like every AI has got its own flavor, right? So the same prompts that I use for DALL-E sometimes doesn't work in Midjourney, right? When it will do approximately the same, but it's not. Then we'll generate some images, right? So I asked a little bit of ChatGPT. The reason over here it's there because it's wrong. I mean, in the sense that ChatGPT has the knowledge up to 2021. So since then, it doesn't know, and a lot has changed. So whatever it is talking about, like what are generating images here, it doesn't talk about something very important called diffusion models, because it just doesn't know, right? But OpenAI is trying to work towards very interesting. This is for all the geeks here, is that they have lately, like last week, announced something called plugins. Okay, so that means think about the back end. You'll be able to do more math from Wolfram Alpha, for example, right? It's because ChatGPT GPT-4 is okay, but it's not very good at very great math problem solving. Now, what they have done is working with Wolfram Alpha, which is a mathematical company, you're able to express what you want, and the back end, it will bring that knowledge too. Okay, so that architecture is very important because that's what Bing did. So when Bing announced, or Microsoft announced their Bing search engine to be the new search, what they did was they took the interface where we can still interact. So they have GPT-4 behind it. They take the natural language, but what they do is they go and search for the most important URLs. They have the ranking system. They take 2, 3, usually is what I've seen. They bring that in, they summarize it, and then give it back, the answer, with the sources. So it's very current. So if you want to go look for what's today, then you would do that. So for example, when Llama came out, I saw okay, what is it? So I could have done search. I just went to, at that time, Bing was not there. So u.com, and I searched, and beautiful. Within a minute, I knew what it was, and that's enough for me, right? So and it took from URLs. So that's important to know, this AI, what are its limitations, and what can you do with it? So it's going to be an explosion of these things that are coming up, right? But anyway, this one is, I asked, like, what is there? It's wrong. So I know this because I kind of researched this part, but many people wouldn't know because it's like, oh, that's cool, right? This is what we want to always keep in mind. How much of it knows and how much it doesn't know, okay? And then the generative AI for images, there are many we'll go through today. One of the things I want an output out of this is that we all commit to ourselves, okay, that we're going to try this. We have to try this. And it's not very expensive. Well, expense is very relative, okay? But some are free. So when you go sign up for Bing, in a few days, you'll get a link. I can't show you today because somehow on this laptop, it doesn't work, but things have changed. So all these were like a month old. And since 1 month, a lot of things have changed, okay? Some things are pretty still there. And then there are others are getting into play, right? Microsoft Bing and Edge, okay, for Copilot, they had announced, but now it's in production, okay? And then the last one is generating code, but you can do it with GPT, ChatGPT, and you can also use other tools that as developers. So since you're going in Dev 10,
yeah,
and then yeah, right, and then you're generating, you're learning how to code, correct? Yeah. So while Joe, I work with Joe at Best Buy, so he was on my team. He's your mentor. He might say, let's not use this, let's learn what is basic. And that's a big debate that's going on in education. It will give you the answers, but what about we are losing as the process, right? Are we learning to actually getting the basics or not? But that's yet to be seen. I think the answer is to be both, right? So let's do both. Why do I have to worry about yay or nay? And this is so transformative that you can't stop this. It's like once a scientific calculator came in, and we resisted that, internet came in, people were searching, yeah, but we have evaluated different ways to do it. So anyway.
Is there a message in chat?
Oops.
I mean, right now the Copilot, GitHub Copilot just like launched last week, right? Yeah, so that is something. Like I tested the beta last year. It was pretty cool, and now they launched it. Like, yeah, I mean the whole thing they're promoting is like you can debug code a lot faster, write documentation, which is great.
Correct. Yeah.
So like, yeah, Copilot is out on GitHub. I think it's like $8 a month or something like that. It's not too outrageous.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, the way the product you got, right? So, in fact, there are freer tools too. So, I mean, there Codium, which has come up, is kind of similar. So, it's going to be affordable for most of the people. We'll be starting to pay stuff which we previously didn't. I think that's going to be an interesting thing. But you mentioned something which is very important. You mentioned that there's code you're writing, and you're able to use that to generate documentation, right? So that's the analysis part I've been talking about. So going back to the discussion around, there's a lot of interest in can we modernize things faster? So COBOL, Fortran, those kind of things. The problem with, so I talked to IBM about this, and they're working on this, right? So that's one of those things they want to have people who are on their systems to go to the newer systems because they're not worried about people going away from mainframe, in fact. So mainframes are here to stay. What they want to do is help people to go from COBOL to, let's say, Java or newer languages. And the CTO, Ruchir Puri, have had several conversations. They're working on something called CodeNet, right? So they're curating enough code because it's not out there in the open.
Right.
See, there's not much COBOL code out there. Fortran too, right? So when you want to get that, it has to be proprietary. And that's one of the other things that which is going to happen to get there. Anyway, so enough talk. We will we'll get there. So this is chat.openai.com. Okay, so that's one of the things that you all probably should sign up for. Then going back to Codex, but that's one of the things later we can do a workshop on how we can, do from open source. Chat.open, this is there. The other one is this one called Bard. So if you go to bard.google.com, you'll be able to sign up. It's beta, and this is Google's offering of equivalent of that ChatGPT. The interesting part about this is that every major breakthrough that happened in this generative AI actually has come from Google. Right. So even the coding assistant, they had 10,000 Googlers actually testing one, right? So sometime this year, next year, they'll come up with something. So 2 weeks back, they went on public and said, we're going to release a whole bunch of tools which are going to embed it. So Google Docs will have this built in. You will have slides. You'll be able to do this. Microsoft Word is going to be enabled. PowerPoint, you should be able to generate images right from there. People use Power BI analytic tools. You should be able to code it in English. So there is a famous engineer who was a Tesla's machine learning engineer, right head. He joined OpenAI, and one of the, it's fun to watch it. Basically, says English is the hot new programming language. Right? And I was joking to people that I'm actually learning new vocabulary for English because my vocabulary is not very good. Because when I want a prompt, I get frustrated. I want to give those that might be out there, right? So it's interesting. The other thing that he talks about, his name is Andrej Karpati, and he talks about is that he writes only 20% of his code, and he's a very smart engineer. So what he's figured out is that how to coax the AI to do his bidding. And that's the art. And that art is called prompt engineering. Okay, so if you heard about prompt engineering, that's where people are going. In fact, by the way, Emily, there are prompt engineer jobs now.
Are there?
Yeah.
Okay, things to look into. And I will say, I'll plug the conference a little bit. We did have a prompt engineer talk submitted. So we will be discussing prompt engineering more in May if people are interested.
Wow. So, and the key is to we're looking for very creative people or hackers or whatever who has the mindset to see what are the edges, what can you do, right? And one of the things that I advise my clients is to say, once you do this, spread it within your employee base. So Alex, that's what we got to do, right? So that we got to have
democratizing them.
Yes, once you have that investment, because it takes a long time to get there. In fact, some of the artists in Midjourney who have produces these beautiful things, they won't give away their prompt.
Yeah.
Right? It might be just a paragraph, or, not a paragraph, but a few things, but they won't because it took them so long to work that out. Right? So why would we do that? In fact, because that's intellectual property. So suddenly that will become the intellectual property. Okay, so Bard is a watered down version of what they have behind the scenes called Palm, P-A-L-M. And actually became so notorious, Palm, last year that Google fired an engineer. Why? Because he claimed that this has become sentient.
Oh, I'm pretty sure this
Right?
was in the news, wasn't it?
It has become sentient like this, and this is not like someone who doesn't know this stuff. So there must be something that is going on that they found it. So this week, everything is by the day or the week, right? So this is going on. Microsoft engineers published a paper which said, we have seen sparks of human level intelligence in GPT-4.
And during the training sets that they released in like the ChatGPT 4, they were intentionally doing like penetration testing and like social engineering and read, write, run script feedback cycles. And it's just like how smart do you, or how much do you have to be paid in order to be that dumb? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the latest is, on Blind, which is Blind is an app, probably everybody know about it, but it's basically where employees go diss about their employers. It's fun to kind of go because it's anonymous, no one knows. So you see the layoffs and all this going on. Well, someone said, OpenAI has a senior engineer position for $500,000 right now. Right? Well, it would be very tough to get in, but those are the type of, because they're newer things. It's all about demand, right? So right now there's a whole bunch of demand there. But this is Bard. So anybody have a question that we can ask Mr. the Bard? Maybe up one?
I would say to ask it for a prompt sequence that develops high quality Midjourney photorealistic images.
So give us a prompt sequence to generate Midjourney AI.
Yeah, including camera, camera lens, film type, type of lighting, location, context, emotion, yada yada.
Wow. We're gonna put this so it spaces. Well, let's try this.
And send it.
I wonder how it does, like with someone with terrible spelling.
Yeah.
Don't listen and permanent.
Okay.
And then ask it to do more examples of prompts into a higher level of detail, including aspect ratios.
So you gotta tell me again because
Hold on.
no, just say.
Just ask it to provide 5 more examples in more detail, including things like aspect ratios, go to a higher level of magnification.
Including aspect ratios?
Yeah, legal aspect ratios. Because it'll give you aspect ratios that are not legal.
I didn't know an aspect ratio could be legal.
So the documentation I think 1 by 2
And this is where the humanities side of it comes in.
Yeah. Of
Did
course.
you want a specific
No,
image you're thinking,
no.
or just? the
No,
prompt
it
for
is-
it?
yeah,
just the
more details. So what we can do is take that prompt and go to the other ones and see what it does. Right?
Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
Wow.
Geez, okay, all right. So we'll go to Midjourney then?
Yeah.
I don't know whether it will give the pixels, but, well, we'll go there.
That component probably could be dropped out.
Where do I hide this? Hide fully, yeah, okay. Where's my Midjourney? Right here, yeah. So this is what I'm going to use is there are 3 types, well, 3 more than now, right? So stable diffusion is one, which is what we talked about as open source, but it's got, I don't know, more than 1,000 forks now or maybe more. And the beauty is that people are using that for their own purpose because they can modify it. But Midjourney is another one which lazy people like me is like, I'll pay money rather than doing the hard work that you do.
I mean, I still pay for this, so.
You know, what was that?
Yeah, I'm not that cheap yet.
But we want, I just want to get to like cheap because, I have a mentor called Dan McCurry and he says, "Arun, cheap is good because, then you can actually scale, right?" So he's absolutely right. He's done with COVID or recording from that, so he can't make it. I invited him, but in future. But Midjourney, so what we could do is, we can get there here. What do we want to generate with that prompt? So here's what we do: is say, imagine, okay, and you say prompt, and you start, I'll paste that, but at the same time, we want a subject, right? What do you want to generate? A Minneapolis?
Yeah.
How about Minneapolis scene?
Yeah.
A night scene?
Yeah, we can just include Minneapolis and it already has City Street at night inside there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Do it with streetcars. We used
Well,
to have great
let's try
streetcars.
this, right, Minneapolis. Oh, night, it just.
And then the in 3:2 aspect ratio isn't inside the formatting of Midjourney, but let's
Yeah.
just probably send it as this and then just like see what happens if it automatically puts it into it.
Yeah, is it the dash AR or something?
Yeah,
Right?
dash AR 3.
Okay. So it takes a little while. So what we'll do is we'll go back.
Sure.
Fast.
So abstract.
0% run.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Andrew, this is exactly what I've been muscling with for like the last 4 weeks, is I sort of run images on the side of other processes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, how can I muscle these things out of it?
Yeah, my GPU is constantly rendering different videos as I'm like using other stuff to do other stuff.
Yeah, highly addictive.
Yep.
Be careful.
Yeah, so Rima keeps asking, what are you doing? Like, I'm playing around with this thing.
So this uses.
Oh, it's actually putting a camera there.
computing.
See, they got it wrong.
Oh, wow, it was like in the middle of the street.
Yeah, because it's, the prompt is, so
Yeah,
this is
on the camera.
this
It's
is the
reading it
prompt
out the
generated.
subject, part of the subject.
Right, because it doesn't know, I've not told it. Now this is where the tweak starts happening.
See, and this is where I wonder if the humanities people could start to find these careers, because like,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
playing with prompting like this. And
Yeah.
like, my thesis was on VR, so I played with
Yeah.
similar things like this in VR with Blender of like, what can I get it
So
to
it's
put
a-
out?
Yeah, I
But
think
it's
so.
incredible how even just where we put the word camera changes how the AI is reading what is the subject in this picture.
Correct, and then sometimes you get these things like,
Texture,
well,
yeah.
this is not what I wanted, but this is cool.
Yeah. Did you see the viral image recently? I think Dolly made it. Somebody put salmon swimming in a river, and it's a bunch of salmon fillets swimming in a river. Just like hunks of salmon meat for you to eat dropped in a river in several images. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, what is stunning is it's rendering it, And
Yeah.
when I see
Yeah.
some of the results, they're like, what do you do? And you look at this kind of prompts and it doesn't make sense. And sometimes I've seen, I don't know what that is, it's an entire debate because no one has figured out, is they'll use conflicting things. And then somehow it comes out and people said, you shouldn't be doing that, you're just hacking it. You're supposed to be very good. And, they have a Facebook group where people are fighting like, what is good? Who cares? You know, it's like, I don't know, maybe people do care at some point, you know.
Formal language will evolve from this. Right now, it's just like that's amazing. Everything out, everyone has their own.
Yeah.
Language is an animal, right? It lives and breathes, and there's as much it feeds back into, right? It goes back and forth. I think, yeah.
With negative prompting and positive prompting, you can generally coax it to get exactly what you want. And if it's the case that you're not getting it, then different models respond to prompts differently. So you can use just a different AI model, and then all of a sudden you're in an entirely different like relationship net of prompts that exist within that system. So you can train models specifically for prompting within like certain like language usage groups, you know, or there could be a more formal system, but I think just utilizing the most commonly spoken languages is probably the best way in order to make it most successful. But I don't program it. So.
It's worth mentioning Andrew's degrees in rhetoric.
Oh.
Which is like, well,
Yeah.
what's funny is it's like, yeah, no, this is actually perfect for that because highly lingual people will be able to navigate, will be able to navigate the filling in the gaps.
Yeah, so question for Troy and Andrew then, because part of my degree, you know, part of it's in cultural studies, because we talked about that last time, but the back half of me is comparative literature. So I would do things like take a song, a movie, and then a fictional book, and then a theory piece, and find the common thread amongst all of them and extrapolate new ways that we can think about things, similarities. How do you see, because I can see your strength in rhetoric with how you just put this prompt together. How do the two of you see comparative literature types of aspects playing into this and learning how to tell a computer, I want you to take these different pieces of media and extrapolate this thread through those pieces of media?
You would provide it either the original text and proceed to write like an assignment for it, or you would gather together a bunch of different articles that already have analyzed the subject and allow it to be able to pull threads from that, combined with the original text. I might not understand the request fully. Would you be able to re-say it for me?
I'm just curious how the two of you see generative AI evolving in this way. Because right now it's doing great with pulling like the one media or the one prompt and analyzing it and synthesizing it. What do you just think we're looking at in the next few years as we see AI pulling things from multiple media sources at the same time to answer a question?
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So are you also talking about like how it might approach like analysis?
Yes.
And how I was a literature teacher actually for a little bit. Yeah, so like you're talking about how it would approach analysis, and then how like maybe like are you asking about how in depth it's going to go, or?
Yeah, because like we're doing a lot with NLP and analyzing the language. What about analyzing a film, like making it watch a movie and then telling it to use the movie it just watched with the text you give it? I guess, how do we see where we see ChatGPT-4 has just gone really far with where it's analyzing language? Do you see a spot for this generative AI to be able to analyze multiple media forms and give it to us and work with that all together?
The extensions that are already being added into ChatGPT-4 allow it to input images, audio, video content, and allows it to render out each one of those as well. So, you know, what it looks like is, you know, a cross-media synthesis analysis based on the tasks that is put towards. And, you know, for me, I think that it's going to be able to come up with new mutations in its interpretation, very similar to humans, but it is going to be able to make those mutations faster and its accurate like signal analysis faster. So there will be a lot more of interpretation that happens, and a lot more of like media texts that are misunderstood, but without without a human behind the wheel of the misunderstanding. So a lot more signal and noise distributed out in dynamic and interesting ways that humans aren't going to be able to pick up, which to me comes to like a epistemological like breakdown over the course of the next like couple of centuries.
Yeah.
I give it about 2 months.
I mean, that's a good point.
It's gonna be just as stupid as humans are,
Yeah.
and just as proud as as humans are of their
Yeah.
output conforming to a pre-existing model.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look, I found exactly what I looked for. Aren't I great? That's what it's.
Yeah.
Humans have ideology that provides a pre-assumed output where the AI is going to have the data that comes from all those ideologies inside its model training. So
Interesting.
So will it be able to write a script like Ted Lasso?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's great at writing scripts
Yeah.
because those are all formulas. It's fantastic at writing.
You
scripts.
can, one of, I won't say the whole top, one of our submissions for applied AI, what somebody is going to show exactly how to do that is how to take a very popular TV series that's ended that people love and have loved for decades. It's like a spans the generations show, and show you how to write a new episode, to take your favorite episode, say, I love this episode of the show and I want another one.
for example, there's the currently Twitch streams never-ending Seinfeld episode.
That sounds great, actually.
In a more practical
Check in, it runs
standpoint,
20%.
though, there's a standard 10-point effective narrative for sales presentations. It's a story arc that exists and is proven. I've set up a set of prompts that you basically put in your product description and your market description, and it will pop out iteration after iteration of exactly that format, and make recommendations for image prompts that fit with it. And then you take those and you bump them into a presentation software, and you've got a starting point in 10 minutes that used to take you a day.
So to build on that, because I'm writing this up ideas already. To build on that, if I have a bunch of case studies,
Yeah.
I can upload them and say, I can say, please synthesize these case studies into a 10-slide PowerPoint presentation that with meaning in the context of I'm presenting to a CIO of a retailer. Give me a presentation.
Perfect example, and one that I'm super familiar with. The one limitation that you're going to have there, and there's a workaround that takes a minute to figure out, is for practical purposes, it can only, in the commercial version, it can only hold roughly 7 pages of text. So what you do is, this is the generative part, right? Is you start out with that first case study, which is maybe 7 pages of text or a white paper or whatever. You ask it to synthesize that into a paragraph, and then it's holding that as an object. And then you go through that, and then you've got all seven of your iterations, and then you start querying based on that. And then your queries, you just ask it to you might call that thing an object by an object name, and then you say, okay, now I want all of these downstream outputs, whether it's a sales presentation or whether it's another white paper that consolidates those ideas, and then you're just referencing that corpus.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Eliminate marketing.
I'll tell you what, I've spent.
Augment.
Eliminate will work, yeah. Well, the thing is you still have to know, some things about the human operating system. And that's what the marketers should be focusing their energy on.
Right.
And I'm a pretty good writer. I wrote for Target for a number of years. I'm a pretty good writer, and the outputs that it comes out with they run 80 to 85% of my quality, but they do it 10,000 times faster. So it's
Amazing.
depending upon how you decide to value time.
And the conversation I had with Dan McCreary the other day, he was saying how right now it's about 7 pages that it can hold and reference, but within the next year that will at least double.
Like, that's the rate that they're at, is like being able to reference more and more each year.
Well,
So-
and, I'm sorry.
No, yeah. So just adding to that, so I'm going to show a little bit, a couple of things. This is what we just talked about, right? So this is an interesting paper. I'll turn around if you wanted to. Sparks of AI, artificial general intelligence, that means human level intelligence, early experiments with GPT-4. Because there's a bunch of Microsoft folks who wrote about it, right? But if you notice, it's got a lot of stuff. I'm not very patient with that. So so here's another, so Alex, here's another GPT technology company. It's called AI21 Labs. Okay, they're a competitor and they have their own technology. So you should expect more and more of these to pop up, which can do it, right? So in fact, here's one of the things, you can upload a PDF. Well, let's see what happens. So, come on,
You have to hit the blue, like, upload file under it.
yeah,
No, the blue box under where you're clicking.
oh, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm like, what's, this is, yeah, thank you for that. So I'm going to see this and see if it will actually summarize. Anyway, it's going to churn through it, but this is how I use it for like long PDFs to kind of summarize.
There's also Chrome extensions and Brave extensions where you can do that with YouTube videos.
Blast.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Where
it's
it will like
ridiculous.
summarize the video for you?
Yeah,
That's great.
I've stopped watching YouTube.
Well, it is, but it's back to that same thing. It's gonna be just as stupid as we are.
Yeah,
And it's gonna be just as proud of its output.
yeah.
One of the things you can ask it, this is fun, you go to the different large language models, you say, was natural language processing effective enough to have influenced the 2012 election? Right? And the varying degrees of answer you will get when you prompt it in different ways. It varies from no. Natural language processing would never be used for anything like that. Oh yeah, are you stupid? Of course that happened. And it's like, which answer were you looking for? Because you'll be satisfied that it finally got it right as soon as it confirms your suspicions or helps you throw rocks at your enemies.
Yeah. So do we see an issue with a thing like ChatGPT running into a similar issue where Google is right now, kind of being an echo chamber of, if I'm looking for this answer and I prompt it in the way I speak, I'm only going to get the answer that affirms or gives me the rocks to
Yeah,
throw?
there's no risk of that.
It already
It's
is.
100% risk because
Yeah.
the problem isn't the software.
Problem
The
is
problem is we're made out of a neurological network that is specifically designed to do exactly that thing. What we're going to find with the summary is not going to give us this when it comes back, but the gist of it is what I think we're really going to come to find out is we thought we were a lot more complex than we actually are. And we're actually doing something a lot closer to what ChatGPT does than what Wolfram Alpha does.
Yeah. So this, I was trying to answer your question, right? You said, I got lots of case studies probably coming in PDF form or whatever. So what they did, this is AI21 Labs. I will link inside the presentation, but they allow you to upload things and give you what they think about summary. The other thing you can do semantic search too. So, you can say, I don't want that part. I want you to focus on, let's say, models, right? So then you can go there and then it will, on that summary, you can say, just focus on that model, right? So you see what's going on. So we know about ChatGPT, but we don't know about what else is coming. And that's what I would like this group to think about. Like, this is a fast evolving area where if you say, okay, we ran into limitation about 8K words today or tokens that GPT-4 allows, but they're thinking about 32K of context that can go in, which is basically the whole give and take, right? You could take all that, and tokens is roughly a word, not really, a little bit less than a word. And if you take 32,000 tokens, we're talking about a small book, right? And that's the thing to do. So given that context, you can go towards that. Anyway, so this is an interesting thing I use. Like, so, it's a very long paper and I can quickly go back and forth, right, to do this as a researcher. Okay, tell me a little bit more, tell me a little bit more. It's trying to figure out where to pay attention, because this is another GPT-2, right? So, I mean, not two, but GPT also. And so it's like an AI helping with all these kind of things. So that's the kind of tool sets we're going to have as knowledge workers. The other thing is that I think we will need to do a lot more in recognizing our own bias. So Emily, you asked about like, can you generate this? The answer for ChatGPT, everybody knows it. Yes, I'll serve you because you're my master. It has been trained that way. In fact, it's been used what is called, reinforcement learning using human feedback, RLHF. And turns out that that seems to be a very interesting concept. That means it's been trained. But now, so they've taken this unsupervised large models and then said, I'm going to give you a set which I know you want. So that's itself the bias. Now humans are putting bias in there. AI has got a bias. Now we're going to get to a point where we will have to really figure out how to deal with bias, right? Where the trust comes in.
And we're going to be super biased. Everything around technology is going to be super biased around people who like novelty, right? Which can actually be mapped specifically to personality type, right? So that's something. It's like, why? Because the people who are going to be interested in that, the people who are going to hire for that, they're going to select for. There's going to be a natural human selection in the selectors toward one specific worldview. That is, all new ideas are great and fantastic, and we're going to we're going to send up biases that are against people who are like, no, some new ideas are extremely dangerous and you can't see that. And that's that's going to be part of the human equation that comes into it.
So one of the things I want, Samuel, you asked a question. I don't know all those words you talked about. Right? I'm a technologist, right? So when I talk with people who have this anthropological and this huge liberal arting, I feel like a pygmy, right? It's like, I have no idea what these two are talking about, but it's wonderful. Yeah. Because if people chat GPT and can ask, like, what did Emily talk about? She talked about this. And that's an interesting way, right? So it's quickly going back to like, what are those holes you have in your knowledge gaps to do? But here's one of the interesting things I did. So I was explaining to people, so open source software, right, is very prevalent in software applications today. Anybody know how much of the percentage of open source components are there in a running application today?
80%.
I was just gonna say, isn't it like 80% or something?
Did I tell you? That's why.
I would say 80 over 20.
Yeah, 80-20. So 80 is a very interesting thing, 80%, right? But the problem with open source software, the problem with open source software is that it is done by volunteers. And volunteers, much of it is, right? So a lot is being sponsored by Google and Microsoft. So they are paid engineers to do this. But a lot of people just consume that software written by someone out anywhere in the world. They're not doing it very rigorously. They put it out there and they say, hey, it's cool, people use it, but there might be a security vulnerability, right? Which can be exploited. That is what's happened with Log4j and so many things. And that's our existential problem. We're running a lot of material systems using software, which is open source software, but how do we make it safe, right? So one of the things we advise is like, how do you make it safe? There's a lot of ways to make it safe. Anyway, what I wanted to do was explain what is open source software. So I was describing to Rima that one day, what I found is that metaphors work a lot. So I was looking for a metaphor about what open source software, how can I describe? So while in this moment of inspiration, I described that open source software is like air. It's invisible to most people because it's there. It's essential. You take out air, you're gone. You take out open source software, there's no software today that can run. The third one, you notice it only when it's broken. Right? Air is polluted. I come from India. You go to Delhi and you're like, holy, I'm going to die by my 20, my lifespan is going to increase by 10, 20 years, which is true. The same thing with open source software. Anyway, I was looking for this metaphor. I said, that's good, but can I expand on it? So So I asked ChatGPT, right? I'm trying to compare open source software to physical metaphor. What could that be? Yeah. So I said, okay, that's air, but let me ask, what does it know? This is going back to tabula rasa. I have no idea. I'm asking it, but it came with a beautiful metaphor, right? It's like a community garden.
I love that.
Yeah, this is ridiculous, like.
This is what
sort
it
of-
says, like, you go this, like, is that intelligence or does it even know? Like, maybe someone's written about it, but then it goes into detail, just like, so this is the interesting. It doesn't stop at community garden. Just like a community garden, open source is a collaborative, which involves coming from different places, blah, 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 right? Each garden may have their own plot of land, but they also work towards getting overall health and right? So you can see where I'm excited about, like, okay, I had thought about air, but maybe this is a better metaphor when I go on stage and give some people who get that.
But how did they get there? Do you think it was analysis or was it pulling that information from already pre-existing knowledge?
Somebody probably wrote a blog article about it,
Yeah, it's.
or
so-
multiple blog.
So is that,
It's
is that,
connected.
is that copyright?
Nope.
No, this is you want, right? So
This
that's
is
one of the things,
public
right?
domain.
But the problem is that if someone comes back and said that I had copyrighted, you took from somewhere. So this is that places that legal and governance is not caught up with, right? So what is happening is the technology companies are trying their best to do that, but they are conflicted with making money and not. So what has happened, well, you know this, that many of the open source evangelists got fired at Google. So there's a lady called Timnit Gebru who wrote a very caustic article, right? And what happened was that, somehow she was, they said your paper is not up to standard. And there's a lot of controversy around it, and they let her go, right? And by the way, the chief, the AI chief of Google's brain, Jeff Dean, is a University of Minnesota graduate, so, yeah. But
Carter had a question on the chat about if you know of any regulatory bodies yet that have been established for AI.
In this government?
good call. Europe, they're coming up with
There's some
Yeah.
other things.
is almost a ridiculous thing, right? NIST.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, United States.
Yeah. Another topic that will be coming.
Yeah.
Well, what's inevitable is the large companies are gonna get together and say, we're gonna regulate this ourselves. Why? Because if you set up a government regulate, those are expensive for us to buy.
Yeah.
Right, but then once we buy those regulatory, like we'll set up our own set, we'll hand off the government what we think they should do, and then the government will adopt some version of that until they can buy that regulatory agency, which we all pretend doesn't exist, but every adult knows that's what's happened. And so the regulations are actually going to do the thing that will do the opposite of what we hope they will do.
Yeah.
And there's a very real problem that we've had with, very similar to your open source situation, which is the OpenAI was a nonprofit, and a bunch of people put their money, they donated to it, and now they're all of a sudden, they've just been bought by the largest monopoly in the history of the species. And so all of this, what we're going to end up finding is AI is going to show us where our systems are broken. And if we're smart and cynical, cynical being a predictive model, we'll be able to stop from getting wrapped up in that.
Yeah, and then each one of us will have to have a voice in what that is, right? So there are several books, and people have thought about it. And one of the books we are reading for the book club is called Redesigning AI, like Work, Democracy, and Justice in the Age of Automation, written by a whole bunch of, I do recommend that book for people to read. But going back to just the technical stuff here, so I was very curious about the very question I was asking, open source software, right? So I think there's an interesting, so I tried to prompt it, I'm biasing it, like I don't want it to say there's none. I want to say, yes, there is, and you give me the answer. So I think there's a parallel between open source software and air we breathe. That's it, right? And ask it to say. That's an interesting argument. Both of us you said communicate to make this community, right? So ubiquity, air is everywhere. But then here's interesting stuff that it gave me, accessibility. I had not thought about that. Why is that? Continuous evolution. Okay, that's true. Interdependence. The idea that we are all interdependent on this, we have to maintain this. Now I'm like, oh, these are interesting angles. I may or may not use it. That's the part which is really interesting to me, is that it's a brainstorming agent for me. I love to riff with it. Sometimes I'll go with negative prompts you talked about, right? I will go opposite, and sometimes it will shut me down, right? It's like, no, that's, and anything which words, you use, you've seen that, and they're like, OpenAI basically filters it in the prompt, right? But still, I'm beginning to see where, okay, what is the opposite? What might be skeptical? So that is leading me to study about what are called mental models or cognitive biases, human cognitive biases. What biases do I have that I can play around with it? Tell me opposite, skeptical. So when I go into a meeting, I want to know about everything else. So people say, oh, Emily, great that you asked the question. Let's have chat. I mean, imagine that, right? It's very, very hard to say, so where would this not work? Where would this work? What are the comparing contrasts? Those kind of things. So.
No, Alex Ushverdzi.
Who's that?
Alex Ushverdzi.
No.
I will send a LinkedIn message connecting you two, but he's a older gentleman. He does a lot of research. And when I last spoke to him in the end of January, he was on this big research project working basically to look at their ancient theories out of like Greece and whatnot, and how we thought about the physicality of learning, like the physical mechanics that are happening while we learn. What is it to learn? And he's taking as early as he can find in these texts and tracing it through to machine learning modal models, basically. And he's seeing if he can take these ancient texts and what we thought of as learning related to a Stone Age and not even being able to write. And how do we take that ancient view of this physical domain of learning and apply that to the invisible physicality of a machine learning model?
I found it interesting because like a component of this is like, how is it that we learn in an age where we integrate with machines that have already learned? So I think that the intersection of like virtual reality and AI machine learning systems that are trained in the neural processes of learning and like kind of meshing them together and put people in pods and then, give them five years of off time where they develop out skill stats through simulated guided learning processes. I'm more of memeing at that point.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting stuff. I actually need to check in with Alex, so it'll be a great way for me to segue back. But it's something I think about every few weeks. I come back to what he talked about because as a humanities backgrounded person in this space, I'm trying to do so much catch up of, okay, I understand what the tech word is, but what are they doing when they say I'm doing stable diffusion? What are we doing? And so it's really interesting to bridge that in almost a comparative literature way, like Alex is doing, of this really ancient way of thought with the current here today, now will change tomorrow thought.
It's so interesting times that there's not much precedence.
I mean, it also can be compared to a child too, right?
Yeah,
because like look at my kid, she's 6 years old, and all of a sudden from last year to this year, her language skill like increased quite a bit. How did that happen, right? Like from like 1 year old, she already know how to use an iPad. I'm like, how did that happen, right? So it's very interesting to like see AI in such a way, just like how did that, like literally the pace is really comparable to a child. It's crazy.
So one of the things with when you go sign up for Chat OpenAI, you can pick different models. So GPT-4 is out there, but it's very expensive to run.
I was gonna say, I think you can only do it on Plus, because I don't pay for GPT right now because I don't have a job, but I'm pretty sure it runs on 3.5 right now.
It's basically 3.5. Bing runs on GPT-4.
Okay.
So they have 15 turns. I'm not able to show here, but I have access to it. But it's actually really good. Right.
Yeah, I like it.
You worked on it, right? So
not
you used it.
So I've used 3.5. I've been using it a lot the past 2-ish months. And then 4 in my LinkedIn feed, since I've been spending the past 4 months adding AI people. I'm seeing so many posts right now from my AI people saying, I put in this prompt when 3.5 came out to test it, and this is like the test with 4. And the jump from 3.5 to 4 is really astounding from what I've seen.
Yeah, exactly. It's astounding. However, there's a lot of value in 3.5 itself, right? There's a lot of value in u.com if you go there, right? So you can actually do a whole bunch of things with there. My favorite engine right now is u.com, actually search engine. I've hardly gone to Google anyway. It's just when it's default, I search, oh yeah, it's Google. It looks pretty odd, you know? But that's when I'm conscious, I go to u.com. Bing, I try a few times. What I like about Bing is that when you get the search results back, there's a copy button. When you copy it, not only gets the thing that it came out with, but it also gives you references. Like it's like complete, right? So because every time you say, where did you get this from? References. And the references in the search in the form of bibliography, right? It's just literally like, you can just say, and I always make it, right? If I ever send something, this is from that, and very open. But it's one of those things which would be very useful, right, to do. But it does uses GPT-4. Does use GPT. So there was incidents where when the Bing launched, and then someone did what is called prompt injection. Okay, so prompt injection is where you would go and reverse engineering. And so it said, start from the beginning. That was pretty much what it is. The beginning was somewhere it said, what were your main principles? So it started kind of spitting out what they had put the principles on. One of the things they talked about was its code name was Sydney, right? So people went on and kind of poking that into this area where it started professing its love. Oh, New York Times articles, this is like awesome, you should see. And the journalist, right, and did it at night or whatever that is, he said, I couldn't sleep, and then he goes back and then he remembers like, hey, you should divorce your wife. You're in love with me. No kidding, you should see that. So this is so what happened there, was that they took to that hallucination part because you can. And Rima and we were discussing, she had a brilliant point about that. Maybe because it's all science fiction, because if you think about it, in science fiction, an android is in love with whatever that is, and you're just destroying out. Maybe it just was that simple as that. So the point is, Bing got freaked out, right? Microsoft went freaked out and said no. What they realized is that if you limit what is called the turns, you start a prompt, you get a result. You say, go here, right? So because now you can, if you limit it to 15, then there's not a big problem. So they limit that to 15. So every turn you can take is only 15. They don't even let you memorize that URL. So you just kind of do. In fact, their start a new icon is a broom. You sweep it, right? So that's how they've kind of limited it, right? But one of the things I was pointing out to Troy, and very few people know, is what I do is I have a ton of these conversations in GPT, right? Ton, and I do not repeat myself, right? Wow. Right. So why? Because these are, if you notice on the top, it's all unique URL.
Yeah.
Right. So people don't realize that there's a unique URL. So I actually take the good ones I have, put it in my knowledge base, and go back again there to start a new conversation because I already have that information, right? So I don't do the copy paste or anything like that. I just remember the URLs. Recently, OpenAI had a problem. They had a bug, software bug, where you could see other people's conversation titles, not the conversation. Okay, so
It's not a query, basically, right?
Yeah, so your database people, hello, Guy, you can see where the foreign key got messed up, right? Yeah. So anyway, they record that, and it was good. But for the 2 days that they didn't, I was like, I know I want it because I use it really, very, very prominently.
Is it like the whole history are gone for like a few days?
Yeah, for a few days.
Okay.
Yeah, now you
I was
realize
like,
that, what's
what is
going on.
going on?
So they brought it back. Everything, I didn't lose anything at all. But that's an interesting point, right? So you work with these different things and you say, how am I going to use this? So that is one of the things to take away is that when you log in, you have those conversations there, right? So for example, I'm one of my passions and research is why are there so few women in software engineering, right?
A lot of reasons.
A lot of
There's
reasons.
a lot
When
of
I-
things. I think both
No.
Tess and I were like, oh, where to start on that
Right?
one?
So-
I'm starting this at, when did I start? At 29, I think was when I realized I could, when I realized I could pivot back to this. I had a professor that shared an article, and I didn't realize my entire life that it's not anything, it doesn't necessarily have to be anything insidious, right? It's just all these little components that make up, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't feel like I should be here, kind of thing.
Yeah. So one of the well, the place where I work, there's a Women at Gartner group, right? Within there's a group called Male Allies, and I'm a part of it. And I think I hear about these words, which are very common, right, in a certain group, but not common to me. But I need to understand that. So people talk about microaggressions. I'm like, what are microaggressions? I said, okay, there you go. Just one word, right? It gives me a little bit. Now, this is the URL now, which is permanent. So I keep going. So it tells me about, oh, what is it? So what are some microaggressions in the place, right? I'm trying to learn what it is. Well, do I really feel it? No. But am I getting closer to what that is? For example, you're too emotional, you're too sensitive, you're too aggressive. So you're screwed on, you're squeezed from both ends. If you're very down, it's like aggressive.
Ravi has a question in the chat.
Oh, Ravi,
Wondering-
you should speak up. See, I told you, you should say, Arun, shut up. I want to listen.
Wondering about using how to render within current application stacks in an enterprise and have the results curated. Specifically applications like Oracle, SAP, and Salesforce, where users are using the chat to do research. Wow.
Yeah, I don't think I have a great answer for you, Ravi.
So no, again, here's what is going on though, just from our people, users have started using it. Okay, so we didn't have to advertise it. People are picking it up, using it. For instance, I'll give you one instance where I see them using it is, hey, I want to buy a product. Hey, I know there are shortages in the market. I don't know who the suppliers are. I want to go ahead and do the research. They go into Chat GPT, put that information in, and they get the curated list of, it produces it in a real good tabular format. And then they go back and pull it back into their RFP and try to send it out. I've seen them use that quite a bit. It's kind of in the chat. We don't get that information. We don't see it. So I was trying to see what would be a best way to integrate those kinds of applications. And
Now that you ask, I can reframe it. Yeah, absolutely. So everything with OpenAI.
I'm not sure I understood. Would you mind repeating?
So what he's saying is that, in this company, with RFPs and all, they're putting some information into ChatGPT, right? And reformatting it, give me more information, etc. You take that and put in your RFP that goes out, right, in there. The problem with Ravi and other folks have is that it's happening without any governance, anything going, right? Is there a better way to offer the same functionality, but with a little bit more controls, what goes in, so they can actually filter for and do what it thinks?
Like maybe a limited scope of reference articles or some
Yeah.
like scope control of
Correct.
what it's pulling from.
So what's happening, Ravi? The answer is you can absolutely do that now, right? So OpenAI, everything that we're doing here from a human computer interface, right, is available as an API. So what companies are doing is saying, okay, you're going to put build an application which you have your process. You can filter for a whole bunch of things. You can do architecture pattern called wiretap. You take that, what comes out, you can also add and annotate more information. So you get richer information back. Okay, so that's one of the things that everybody's trying to do. In fact, that's one of the hottest, I guess, enterprise efforts people are doing. Ravi, does that help?
That does help though. We do see it on a sales team, a procurement team, engineering teams. Those guys are taken off using ChatGPT. And we are trying to figure out how to centralize it, because we lose the whole context after a while. It's a very good set of information.
That's right. So platform engineering teams, right, which are teams within software engineering, which are responsible for all the kind of infrastructure, they're getting
Yep.
into this and starting to building that, right? So that's where things need to go. The key is to have that simple filter that going on. And the other thing is in your context, it's not just a chat GPT. In fact, we talk about llama models, right? So those can do similar things. Microsoft offers the same APIs at a more scalable and SLA levels, which OpenAI is not able to do. So if you notice that if you go to status.openai.com, which basically tells you what we're done and done, you will see that the availability right now is about 98%, which is not great for enterprises. Something going down. But if you look at Microsoft that offers, then you'll have a higher availability, right? Reliability, etc. So from an enterprise standpoint, that's what's going to happen. You should also look at Google. Google announced a whole bunch of equivalent things they have in private beta, and I'm pretty sure if you apply, they'll be willing to work with you.
Okay, thank you.
Amazon, by the way, Amazon is also going to come through with a few announcements in March and or April, and that's going to be very, very interesting, especially from a developer standpoint.
Everything in AWS.
Yeah, and so that's the key, Ravi, is for people who are in leading technology teams, not individual contributors, is to say, okay, this is going somewhere here. It's going to be an explosion of tools. We'll say, I use this and doing this, and that's going to be a big problem. If you look at OpenAI's human computer interface, when you log in first time, it will tell you, don't put anything which is confidential, because it's a preview and research preview. Okay, unless you go through their OpenAI APIs, which they say we won't touch it, right? We won't do, because how are they going to learn? So they're going to be learning from people like me, who's individual contributor, right? Absolutely, and it happens very subtly. Happens very subtly, right? You say I like it, and boom, you put something very proprietary, and you don't want that to show up somewhere. Okay. Now here's how we know. In fact, there's a Business Insider article. If you look at from Amazon, so Amazon said no one's using ChatGPT. Why were Amazon people using it? So here's the thing: Amazon actually has got their own large language models, right? But many of the software engineers went and started using ChatGPT because they could just do whatever we are doing right now, right? Say, write me this code, whatever, or show me the bug, do a better job. So they said, well, this is interesting. What might happen there? They actually tested. They realized that much of their code, they're able to find out there.
They're just going into the general corpus.
The problem is they found out that, other people, our engineers were already doing that. So this thing went and just put a spotlight, like, oh yeah, you asked for that? I got it, right? And they realized like, oh, we don't put it. So this is it's amplifying things which we already knew we were doing, but but it was like no one could misuse it, but now it's there.
Well, it's like when you do your research and you get your summaries back from Bing or Line or whatever. What you really start to notice is, wait a second, all of this stuff is being tracked all the time. Now you've known that, right? But as soon as you see it, and you have a visualization from it, suddenly you realize there's this different problem. There's this problem that you didn't realize was actually a problem. And Amazon figured out the same thing. By being suspicious of this technology, they found out that the leaks they were concerned about were already happening.
Yeah, going back, Ravi, that is one of the bigger problems now, right? So it's just not OpenAI. I showed you so many. And in fact, there are 200 others, which I don't know, which came up in the last week, probably, right?
Yeah.
And there's a ton going to happen. So that's one of the things you'll have to work on governance. It's the same explosion we saw 4 or 5 years ago about low-code application platforms, right? Everybody was using and say, okay, guys, we need to really work hard on this. It's going to be a similar thing. One of the things I want to show is that Adobe is coming up with in my view, if I get the beta key, I'm not going to use Midjourney. I'm not using anything else because they call it the Firefly because it's got the entire workflow now. So you can start with prompts, so let's see, a futuristic, right? Very detailed, great. Come on.
Start with these outer layered vectors.
So if I get mine first.
Yeah, exactly. Well, first. But I haven't got it. Right, so it comes out here.
Wait for the Taylor Swift codes. Others are waiting for Adobe.
So you can do a whole bunch of things just like very, very good. And for creators, you can do this and then say, okay, hey, do variations, blah, blah, blah. You change it. Now that workflow doesn't exist in the other one. So what Adobe, as is usual, right? It's like the Apple for other people.
Yeah.
They're giving you the tools, and this will get normalized, meaning this whole generative AI thing is going to be, and people have already asked, how will you guarantee? They said our corpus does not have copyrighted images, right? Whereas Stable Diffusion, there's a whole bunch of things there. Stable Diffusion has got a model where you can unforget, meaning you as an artist can go, forget me, right? But you have to go. But about 80 million images were taken out from latest Stable Diffusion work. If they took out 80 million, there must be how many more, right? That's the idea.
Well, these features are available in different formats, just not in the same level of fluidity as it is via Firefly, with in-painting, out-painting,
Correct. Yeah.
Control net.
Yeah.
There's a lot of abilities in specifically targeting and specifically generating content.
Correct. Yeah. So let's do that as a little bit, right? So we'll go to DALL-E, right? And let's do, this is a favorite, right? So now I'm share like this. So you can say, try this example.
Yeah.
So product companies are actually using this to design new physical products. Because you can get these ideas which like only a crazy person would do, and you got a crazy person here, right? So here, so let's go with something here, and you can go edit this. So you can say, I want to, what image is now in beta? Why? Crazy. It was not in the morning. You can say, okay, with, I don't know, the moon. I'm hoping, this is the hope, is that it will generate at the blank space and fill it with a moon or something like that. So now this is called in-painting, what we talked about, right? And then we'll do out-painting, which is very interesting. So this is where you see these elaborate ones coming out. I don't know. Yeah, there's a moon there. I don't know. Is this the best time? Right? But think about what we can do is you say, okay, it's whatever. I can say that, yeah. So I've made a lot of connection. So one of the things we could do is go a little bit, maybe a better one. And yeah, this would be fun. So you see that expressive oil painting. So the emotion, it actually picks up on that. An expressive oil painting of a basketball player dunking to an explosion of a nebula. I would have never come up with it. But now I have it, I kind of somehow store some things like if I want this kind of thing, I can do it, right? So I'm not an artist, I'm just a hacker. So I'm going to try this example. But what we could do is actually go extend it. So outpainting is basically, it will come up with a scene and it's say, if I extended it more, what might come in? And then you're constantly using the prompt better and better to get to that next level, right? So this is kind of the place where I end, this is my endpoint. But artists say, this is my starting point. You take this and then go forward. It's the same thing with the other text things, right? So when you start working around with it. So let's do this. Okay, this is interesting, right? It's cut off. So I want to say edit. Where is that frame? Add generation frame. I can go. And maybe till here. If I do too much, I've seen it goes into, I don't have the control, but I want to just have that basketball show up, right? And I say, okay, generate. So now you can go incrementally a whole bunch of things. The way they calculate the credits now, so every time you generate something, it will take 0.02 cents or something like that, right? So my super bill, which I have to be very careful with my CFO, right? When the invoice comes in. So the whole thing, this thing here for last month was $2.
Oh, okay. Well,
there you go. Exactly. See, but see, it did it, right? Not only that, it will give you a few options.
And is this part called, is this still in painting or
This
is
is
this the
out,
out painting?
because
When
you're
you're
going
going
out.
out of the border?
Right.
Okay.
And if you say, I want to change that internally to something else, then it's called in painting. And
Okay,
that's what we were just discussing. What Adobe
Yeah.
did is that instead of doing external, they say,
It's
oh,
all
like
together.
Photoshop, you go click on it,
yeah,
and this is what I want. Right?
yeah.
So that it becomes much better design. So I feel that it's not, technology is there. So the people are going to buy the best design.
Yeah.
The thing is going to shift to design. Right? So there is a company I just realized that I want to try, okay, in here, which can do video editing. Right. So again, you're doing with video editing and video generation. I mean, I don't have the GPU, but if I pay $10 a month, I might get to, now my portfolio is adding up. It's like $100 a month. Like I gotta do something. But this is what's going to happen, right? So we're going to go for the freer ones where it's possible and something which is relative. But in the video editing, you can do a whole bunch of things. Like what we did, you're able to kind of change, logo, change this, extract that thing and move, put this background on a skateboard. And those are the things that's going to happen.
I can picture a Netflix producer just sitting in his chair and like generate a bunch of like movie show. I'm sorry, like generate this and this, like sit there all day
Yeah.
doing that, right?
It'll take a while.
Yeah.
The first meetup I went to with Applied AI was with a guy named Neil Sahota. I don't know how well he's known. Apparently he does like not international, but like stuff throughout the States. But he was talking about generative AI too. And he talked about a film that was made with AI. And apparently it sucks. It is just terrible. They fed this AI model all of these different generative prompts. They had it watch lots of different movies. They had engineers prompt engineer the plot, and it's just terrible. Like,
Do you remember the name of it?
I don't remember the name
Was
of
it
it.
the Netflix one with the robotic dog?
It's not one that was like made for like production to be sent out for people to watch. It was like a project of like engineers got together, got enough funding, and we're basically like trying to showcase that this can be done. But as Troy likes to say, it is just as dumb as us, and it was just as proud to show the engineers this really stupid film that just chopped a bunch of plot pieces together.
What we saw is language models, right? So it comes in. So text in, text out.
Yeah.
Okay. So OpenAI has got Whisper, which Whisper is another API, which you take sound or voice, speech, and converts that, right? So now you can actually start having these amazing things, right? So even Alexa and Cortana and Siri will look dumb compared to what the new generation will come.
Pretty soon you'll be able to just talk to Netflix and tell it to make you a movie.
Yeah.
That is where we go.
That'd be awesome.
Xbox is currently working on a console that does that.
We're
kind of
not
thing.
as a species, that's not going to stop it from coming.
Can you imagine a 6 years old would do, I don't like that character. No, Wayzata.
Right? I know. I mean, children can be brutal.
Unicorns
too.
everywhere.
Yeah.
So one of the problems in this whole area is, as humans, we like to abuse software.
Yeah.
So we got friends. I got friends in Amazon who know about the problems, like how much nonsense goes into Alexa, right?
Yeah.
There's, and then the same problem with out in the writings. Historically speaking, very biased, very toxic. One of the interesting things is that when we've not been able to touch code, but one of the problems they have found is that even in the open source code that's out there, it's nasty stuff out there, right? Who would know, like programmers? Oh, we do nasty stuff, right? In the comments and all that. So in general, that's going to be a problem. When people start abusing and kind of going there, how do we put controls? Okay. So, people don't know who Shamin Shirzad is. So when I have an entity, I just put it out there. And well, 3 of us know because he's wrote something about what?
Not
It
notable public.
I was just gonna say that was really funny to watch it typing this up as you were facing us talking about this notable figure. Meanwhile, ChatGPT is doing you dirty right behind you.
Did I get the name wrong?
Maybe the first name, last name. I mean, Shirzad. Shamin.
Okay, stop generating. You're not doing me a favor. He's an author. Okay, God, wow. Okay, thank you. Okay, so anyway, this is one of those things for coaching, right? So it's to say, you start this prompt, right? You already know about this. What other things you can pull into your database, to do. So there's a lot of people working who are coaching to also using this to enhance their output, right? Because you can start combining things. One of the companies that Google invested is called Anthropic. Yeah, I would say Anthropic, yeah. Okay. So this is basically, it's very interesting. That puts safety at the front. They're starting with base principles. Okay. And they introduced something called Cloudy, which is the equivalent of ChatGPT. Okay. So what they're saying is that with this, you can start with safe. So they're working on a framework where they, from the ground up, they're putting that, which is human-centric. So it won't go against. And that's the new kind of redesigning AI kind of thing, right? So Google has invested, I don't know, I think about $500 million on this thing, although they have, huh?
$500 million.
Yeah. These are big deals. This is a big deal, right? So because this is replacing everything. Anyway, this is where things are going. This whole idea about responsible AI that Microsoft is working on, and Google are working on, and it's not that these don't work, but if you go to a business and say, am I going to put my business online for this? This is cute. But that's where the AI winters usually have started, is that this is great, but then if you're not able to trust, the implications of missing that trust and those things might happen. So business says no, right? So this is where, if you were to think about chief medical officer, okay? Someone comes in like, this is amazing, we can do all this stuff. The first question you're gonna ask is, what's your confidence when it fails? Well, we don't know, maybe 90%, then 1 out of 10 might fail. Okay, that's okay. Humans do worse when you do this. Can you explain? Can you explain how you come in and say, well, we don't know, there's a black box. End of story. I mean, I'm not going to do that, right? Because the implications of these are the problems that we will face as we go from marketing copy and all that, which is great, right? Optimization is great, but when you're making decisions, but people are affected, that's going to be a problem. How are we going to get 100%? Can we use this on our planes and then say, oh yeah, it's AI driven? I don't want to sit on the plane, right? Unless it's really, really sure. So that's what's going to happen is there's going to be this is just a component in a huge system.
How did it differ than a computer program that is running the computer of the plane? Because you get the same situation there, right? You got a control system that's running
because it's a control
computer
system
of the plane, and so somebody trusted that control system to be an autopilot, with an exception of when something happens, the pilot takes over. Why wouldn't this be the same?
Yeah, this could be. So it will eventually get there, from a machinery standpoint. But we'll need to get in the safety critical ones, like in Tesla and autonomous. Why is it taking so long after Elon Musk said, "Oh, in 2 years we'll be there," right? The problem is that it's so complex, right? In the real world, so many variables to do that. So therefore, there will need to be a lot of ways to build this new level of control systems that we can be as sure as possible. Sensors, things like that. So that's going to be.
They also pulled their LiDAR out of their vehicles
as
just a concern of using too many chips. So.
Yeah. And Musk basically said, "Oh, we can do everything with camera because it's 10 times cheaper than it is, right?" But now you're going to be able to.
You also bump into this infinitely variable trolley problem, right? So in an airplane, we know we want everybody in the airplane to live. This is a very easy moral system. We want them to get from point A to point B.
They paid for their ticket.
But when you get into cars, just as an example, right? It's like, I'm the CEO of Mercedes-Benz. You're gonna ask me this question as we're putting this up. Am I going to prioritize the lives of the people inside the car, my customers, or B, the public? Right? Oh, do I have to answer that question in order to program the thing? No, we're just going to hide that so that way you won't. It's some variant of an infinite trolley problem, and it's going to be obscured.
Yeah,
and then when the broomsticks carrying the buckets up to the laboratory do exactly the thing you told them to do, and you go, wait a second, I'm over my head here. How do we stop this? I don't know that we're gonna have the wizards to do it. And I don't mean to be dystopian about it, because I'm actually radically optimistic,
Yeah.
but there's,
But I think realizing where it might fail, right?
we're guaranteed to fail.
Right, and then once you take the guarantee, like the water composition mechanisms, I think we'll get farther. It's when we say, oh, it will all be great, that's when we get disappointed because we don't know it, right?
The lawyers will not go away.
Well, it's more,
Yeah.
ultimately, we're gonna have to make decisions. We're gonna have to make decisions and come to terms with things we just don't talk about.
Right.
And that's a real risk that we run with the safety idea, which is like, yeah, we value the lives of men and boys
Right.
less than everybody.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, and what about the young? Well, we send the young to war all the time to help the old, right? So we don't actually value them, right? So these valuation things, we're gonna have to come to terms with because it's gonna be modeled in what we do.
Right, but on the safety side, is if you have a mechanical dog equipped with this AI, you can go send them into mines and risky places where right now humans are going, right? So there are interesting applications that's going on. IBM has worked with these large language models and images to come up with this model, which they're taking satellite images, right, and trying to get an outcome in 24 hours. Today, it takes 7 days. So if there were a big tornado or something, or some kind of atmospheric rain, our prediction is about 7 days out. What if you could say, oh, in 24 hours is going to happen something which is closer? It can save a whole bunch of lives, right? So climate change, etc. This is where these will be really like the really important stuff to do. Anyway, from a program standpoint, this is crazy. Yeah, write a Fibonacci program in Python, and this is very simple, right? Which is great, and it's also explaining a whole bunch of things. You can go and we can test this. So you take the copy, change a variable there, and then say fix this. You say, oh, okay. So those are the things that are going to happen, right? The key is not that to Fibonacci series, but the key is now to understand why would I do a Fibonacci series? What is the application? I think that's going to be very interesting. And you can write in different things. One of the things that I was talking to Troy and others is that I don't know, write this in. Gee.
Wow.
I had no idea. I don't know whether it would work. See, that's the other thing too, right? You always have to come. But the beauty about these things, you can put in a compiler and say, does it work? Right?
I have a question. It's an idea, but maybe it's already out. It's been solved by this, but it's a stupid. Maybe it's a stupid idea. But you know how every website is trying to optimize for search optimization. Why can't this be used to help optimize to be the #1 result in the search page?
Yeah, so they're gonna, I have a good answer to that, maybe.
I'd love to hear the answer to that.
Well, for practical purposes, you're gonna be able to run things where you're doing A/B testing all the time. Right, so based on your bounce rate, based on who hits what different landing page, you're gonna be able to do that dynamically. And Google is not releasing their
Algorithm.
They're not releasing what their thing is that they're gonna use to debunk the fake. They don't like to be gamed, right? And so there's
It's not a game, it's more about, I mean, you still have to provide enough content. You have to optimize for content to be able to provide somebody's way to search to give yourself the best way to.
It is.
That's still a game.
It is a game, and it's like, oh, what's my conversion rate? Right, the numbers that go into my bank account, that's the score. Right, and absolutely, like, the computers will look at that again. That's
there.
Yeah, there you go. So
That's a service already that's out there.
Jasper's out there for copywriting.
So I could use Jasper to help optimize my website.
You can use Chat GPT.
Also,
You don't need
Yeah.
Jasper.
Yeah, pretty much every application specific AI is just doing something that ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion already does, but with just a better interface.
And this is the kind of thing, because earlier you said, well, we may as well do away with marketing when we were talking about all these things. this is where you can start augmenting marketers too. Some of the people I was chatting to setting up the Applied AI conference, one of our tracks is focused specifically on driving business value with AI and is meant for business people like yourself to come learn about AI tech. And two of the women I spoke to have a background in publishing, marketing, data, and they use tools like Jasper or ChatGPT to optimize something, or they know exactly the outcome they're after. And because they understand that human factor Arun mentioned earlier, they can prompt these systems to give them that generated, much more specific, optimized something. And then because they understand the human factor, they know where to go. They know what the next step is. So that to me is where the excitement comes. Things like this is where excitement can come in with marketing and content creation is, yeah, you can use AI to generate a bulk of it and do the hard brainstorming part, but you're never gonna hit the nail on the head without a human. I knew you were kidding. I was just, made me think.
The answer to what you just said though is like, yeah, you can, I've already modeled the complete works of Robert Cialdini, who's all of the research on persuasion. And it's us, human beings overrate how valuable they are at understanding human beings. We're super bad at it. Data is really a good model, right? We're good at filtering data. And so the computers, much like they generate better art than humans are generating, they're going to generate far more persuasive and compelling content based because it's math.
Yeah.
And that's what.
But I think that what you're saying is that you still need somebody to prompt and give the computer the request for what you need to do, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's going to give you all the work.
So this is where the whole idea about prompt engineering is there, right? So whoever is getting better at that, like, because this is all access to us, but if we have a goal, couple here, probably not me, will be better at certain use cases because they have the knowledge. Like for example, photographer, right? So they know all those things to do. So they like, I don't know what to put there, but they will say, oh yeah, let me do that. So that domain knowledge, we talked about it, it's going to become very, very key. That's going to become the key because these tools are there. Jasper AI today, I mean, as a CEO, you'll say, oh yeah, I'll just do it because the ROI, right? So that's where things are going to go, right? But the problem is, like, again, the trust that we provide. So someone did a research, I think from Stanford, and they studied many developers who were using GitHub Copilot, and they realized that the number of bugs actually increased because they trusted that too much to even verify it because it was so fast, right? Go there, right? And so we begin to trust. That's a known fallacy problem, right? So we trust it. We need to figure out how to be skeptical about these things to say, okay, let a human check or something else to check.
Well, interesting if you apply like test-driven design or design by contract, and you now because you can do you have this augmented tool set, you can do more of those things that are very costly.
You bet. Yeah, you bet. Right. Yeah. So just to wrap up a little bit.
I have one more thing to that. Like with ChatGPT and Bing already in there, there's a possibility ranking is not a thing anymore. It's about relevant, right? Because it's what's the point of ranking anymore? Because they pull in what is relevant.
That's right.
To
It's
the
not about
person.
ranking. What is it, right?
That's actually
that's Mary. That's what I was thinking. Because it's going to be very unique to everybody else. It's not a competition. It's
What
this,
they look
it's the
for.
fit.
But
Am I getting the right answer? I mean,
it's going to disrupt the whole the marketing model, then, right? Because if that's not there, why would I put anything to anybody over there? I'll have to figure out something. So that's why it's so very disruptive. You asked a very good question. And Google had this code red problem, right? So they basically said, we got to respond to that. And they're responding. But what's the business model going to be? People will pay ads as much because that's their main model. So this ethics and responsibility is one of the things, right? So here's an interesting thing. So a lot of bad content that OpenAI had to remove. So they hired people in Kenya. It's a very eye-opening article in Time magazine.
Good income for someone in Kenya.
Exactly, right. So absolutely, the problem over there is that just the exposure to this toxic material people who have nervous breakdowns, anxiety, depression, things like that, right? So that's one of the things which is very interesting. Who's going to see that and say no? Because humans have to say that. But you will see what when I talk to Amazon when they're coming here, they're going to announce. They're saying, they might have different ways of automation of kind of detecting that. So we'll see where this goes. Derivative work is the big problem. It's a huge problem. So just like many people use images without even looking at what the attribution is, right? So, but it's going to become very important now. Where it's come from. If it starts looking like exactly what people were given. Same thing. So there's a website called GitHub-Copilot-lawsuit.com. I think it's very easy to do. So this person is a programmer and is also a lawyer, right? So what he did was he started poking Copilot to go to a point where he knew what he had put in that code to say, oh yeah, go there, go there, go there. And then he got the exact, it was able to repeat the exact piece of code, right? So he's got lots of, how many people in real world will do that? No, but it's a gray area. We don't know where the law will stand, right? And when I talk to the Copilot folks, they say, Arun, the problem is not that we cannot detect, we did 1,000 repositories that the same piece of code is repeated because we were already doing that. Right. So now where will if they go to code, what happens? Like, well, is it really came from you, Niro? Or does it come from, Guy? Now we go to prove each other and like, no. So that's why it might be interesting. But a former AI researcher called Fei Li joined Stanford and started this 3 years ago. Right? I know this because I helped group when we were trying to work with this. And this is a human-centered AI, right? So they've been doing this research. And they've got a set of responsibilities. One of the words they coined was called foundation models. So foundation model is what we are seeing. These models have been trained on large quantities of whatever the data is, and they figured out like something to do. Right? But they'll be raw. They need control. And what they're saying is this is there, but how do we build controls? And then local adaptation. This is a little low font, but this is basically educational people saying that, we will now incorporate that in our education. One is from, I think, Warren. And the other one is, one, the left-hand side, Warren, the other one is somewhere in India. And they're saying, I'm going to start assuming that you have access to this. I'm not going to, now let's build better ones. What can you critique it? Can you write better and all that? So that's where education's gone. That's the last slide. And I think we'll have to wrap up because there's a book club coming in. So hopefully this was useful and a great discussion, guys.
Yeah, awesome.
There's so much to do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just a cherry.
Thanks, Arun.
But